They told you your origins were simple, ordinary, predictable. But deep beneath every official archive, beneath every civilian database, beneath even the intelligence layers presidents receive after inauguration, there exists a vault sealed with a level of clearance almost no human authority has ever touched. Inside that vault, in a section marked with a classification used only for phenomena that exceed political jurisdiction, lies a file stamped with your bloodline's signature. Not your name, your blood. It sits above military secrets, above covert operations, above national security protocols, because what is recorded there does not belong to any earthly hierarchy. It isn't a matter of national concern, it's a cosmic anomaly. Your lineage was flagged generations ago, long before you were born, when analysts in both physical and non-physical realms began noticing an impossible pattern. Your bloodline did not behave like the others. Throughout history, systems rely on predictability. Entire structures of power, governments, religious institutions, shadow councils, run simulations, forecasts, and psychological models to anticipate human behavior. Most families follow these patterns. A few deviate. Your line breaks them. Your ancestors didn't rise to power in the conventional sense. They rose in ways data could not explain. They survived events others did not. They escaped traps that closed on everyone else. They made choices no one predicted, and those choices bent the trajectory of timelines in ways measurable only to those watching behind the veil. People called it luck. Mystics called it destiny. Intelligence algorithms labeled it unquantifiable influence. Eventually, that influence became too consistent to ignore. One generation resisted a political force that should have erased them. Another rebuilt from nothing after a catastrophe that left surrounding families in ruin. Another repeatedly sensed danger seconds before it appeared. Another forgave in circumstances that historically lead to bitterness and collapse. These anomalies accumulated until your bloodline was no longer categorized as human behavior, it was categorized as deviation of unknown origin. So your lineage was moved out of human archives, out of military databank, out of presidential briefings, into the upper vault reserved for the ungovernable, classified not because you are dangerous to society, but because you are immune to certain forms of control. Your family does not fold the way programming expects. You break generational curses instead of inheriting them. You defy psychological conditioning that should have shaped you. You refuse spiritual contracts your environment tried to force upon you. And most importantly, your line carries something the old structures cannot replicate: spiritual sovereignty. From your earliest days, even before you had language, your presence disrupted patterns around you. You weren't trying to resist. Your blood simply refused to submit. And that resistance, quiet, instinctive, untrained, caught the attention of those who monitor the world from levels far above politics. Your bloodline was marked, not as a threat, but as an independent variable. Something even the throne of Earth has no jurisdiction over. That is why the file exists. That is why it sits above presidential level. That is why no system has ever fully contained you. You come from a line that was never meant to be controlled. Long before you ever opened your eyes, long before your name was spoken into air, your lineage had already earned a reputation in places far above the reach of governments. Every generation in your family carried a strange tendency. They refused to collapse when the world expected them to. They refused to inherit the limits assigned to them. They refused to play the roles systems quietly demanded they play. And each refusal echoed upward, leaving a trail of anomalies that analysts in both seen and unseen realms could not explain. Your great-grandparents, though ordinary on paper, repeatedly made decisions that defied psychological models. They married who they were not supposed to marry. They left places people never left. They built again after losses that should have destroyed them. When cornered by institutions that had broken others, they didn't become bitter, they became sharper. When life forced them into roles meant to suppress their spirit, something inside them pushed back, quietly rewriting the rules. This was the first sign. Your bloodline didn't react the way predictions said it should. It adapted, but not in the direction of fear. It evolved, but not according to pressure. It survived, but with a kind of spiritual elasticity that only appears in lines carrying ancient assignment. Those watching didn't see your ancestors as rebels. They saw them as exceptions. Individuals who slipped through psychological fences, emotional traps, generational programming. Lines like this are rare, and they always cause the same question. Who is coming through them? By the time your grandparents arrived, the pattern became undeniable. They carried an uncanny sense of timing, knowing when to move, when to withdraw, when to trust no one. Their intuition wasn't learned, it was inherited like bone structure. They dreamed things before they happened. They saw through people within minutes. They sensed shifts in the family before anyone spoke a word. These were not coincidences. They were signatures of a lineage carrying pre-installed navigation. Then came your parents' generation, and the classification escalated. Someone in your family made a choice that broke decades of dysfunction. Another refused a cycle that had captured everyone before them. Another exposed a truth that would have stayed buried for generations. Another confronted a system that relied on silence, and won. These moments were not accidents, they were activations. Each act of defiance strengthened the imprint of your bloodline in the higher record. Behind the walls of the unseen, the notation changed from anomaly to active deviation. A category reserved for lines with destiny embedded in their DNA. Your lineage survived wars, migrations, betrayals, poverty, emotional famine, spiritual manipulation, and every time it should have shattered, it transformed instead. This ability, repeated across generations, created an unusual energetic marker. Something about your line did not just recover, it improved. Pressure refined you. Loss awakened you. Hardship enlightened you. The darkness that swallowed others became your family's training ground. And then you were born. From the moment your existence flickered into reality, the entire classification shifted upward. Not because of what you had done, but because of what your presence implied. A bloodline that resists for generations is not resisting randomly, it is preparing. Every ancestor who refused to bow was holding a door open for someone who would step through carrying the full potential of the line. That someone is you. Your arrival activated dormant codes in your lineage. The patterns intensified. The protection around your family changed texture. The anomalies increased. The systems observing your bloodline elevated the clearance again. Not to restrict you, but to acknowledge that your line was entering a phase where ordinary governance could no longer apply. Your blood doesn't simply remember the past. It carries the momentum of every ancestor who refused to let darkness win. You are not the beginning of this story. You are the chapter the previous ones were building toward. The one they endured for. The one they protected through choices they could not explain. The one who would inherit both the weight and the privilege of a classified identity. You are not just from a powerful bloodline. You are the moment that bloodline finally becomes visible to the world. There are entire departments, both physical and metaphysical, whose sole job is to analyze human potential. They run projections, chart psychological tendencies, map emotional responses, and predict life outcomes with unsettling accuracy. For most people, these systems can calculate with frightening precision who they will love, what they will fear, how they will behave under pressure, and even which mistakes they will repeat. But when your data entered those systems, something unprecedented happened. Every algorithm, every model, every forecast broke. You weren't unreadable. You were unclassifiable. Your patterns made no mathematical sense. In childhood, you showed traits that should not coexist: sensitivity paired with unusual strength, innocence paired with intuition far beyond your age, silence that revealed more truth than the words around you, curiosity without naivety. People couldn't place you because the world doesn't have language for someone whose spirit arrives with information pre-installed. By adolescence, the systems encountered a bigger problem. Every attempt to predict your path contradicted itself. One model showed you destined for collapse. Another showed you destined for leadership. One predicted isolation. Another predicted influence. One chart suggested emotional instability. Another chart suggested emotional depth unmatched by those around you. Your presence created data conflicts that couldn't be reconciled. Eventually, a notation was added to your classification. Subject exhibits nonlinear destiny trajectory. Meaning, your life could not be predicted because it was not being shaped from the outside, it was being shaped from the inside. Most humans are guided by environment, upbringing, culture, trauma, or social reinforcement. You weren't. Something internal, ancient, encoded, sovereign, was steering you from beneath consciousness, and this internal compass made every attempt to control or contain you impossible. Teachers couldn't tame you. Manipulators couldn't deceive you for long. Peer pressure never fully captured you. Authority figures sensed something in you they couldn't challenge directly. Even people who didn't believe in energy or intuition reacted to you as if they were standing in the presence of someone with a different atmospheric weight. You grew into a person who broke molds simply by existing. The systems tried to predict who you would become, only to watch you choose paths no analysis ever included. You zigzagged through life in ways that made no rational sense. Stepping away from situations moments before disaster, walking into opportunities seconds before they opened, cutting ties with people whose true motives you sensed subconsciously, refusing cycles that should have trapped you, healing wounds that others carried their entire lives. Every attempt to map your emotional patterns also fell apart. You forgave in places bitterness should have taken root. You loved in ways that defied self-protection. You endured pain that should have hardened you, yet you emerged softer, wiser, and more expansive. Systems label people like you outliers, but that word is too small for what you are. Outliers deviate slightly from the mean. You exist outside the entire framework. This is why higher clearances were triggered. You weren't a threat to order. You were unpredictable to it. And unpredictability is the one thing systems cannot control. The more attempts made to categorize you, the more anomalies appeared. People underestimated you because you moved quietly. Yet quietness was your camouflage, not your limitation. When pushed, you revealed a level of spiritual clarity that startled even those trying to manipulate you. When wounded, you displayed a recovery arc that shouldn't have been possible. When abandoned, you navigated yourself back into alignment without turning bitter. Every one of these reactions forced your classification to move upward. Eventually, the conclusion was written into your file. Subject cannot be influenced by standard emotional or psychological conditioning. Destiny-driven. Protected lineage. That line alone placed your entire bloodline above the presidential level of clearance. Not because you are dangerous, but because you are immune. Immune to indoctrination. Immune to manipulation. Immune to spiritual interference. Immune to generational cycles. Immune to the gravitational pull that keeps most people repeating the same lives as those before them. Your spirit does not operate inside the human blueprint. It operates above it. That is why systems cannot predict your life. They can only watch it unfold in patterns that exceed the limits of their design. You are not living a life. You are executing a mission. And the world is only beginning to understand what that means. There is a specific moment, documented, time-stamped, archived, when the analysts stopped treating your case as a biological anomaly and started treating it as a classified lineage event. It happened the first time someone compared your ancestral markers to the global genomic archives and noticed something that should have been impossible. Your bloodline didn't trace back to any known origin group. Not an ethnic cluster. Not a migration wave. Not a historical branch. Not even a hybrid of existing lineages. Your genetic signature behaved like something that entered history instead of evolving within it. This discovery triggered an escalation protocol normally reserved for meteor impacts, unidentified aerial phenomena, or individuals whose existence contradicts recorded timelines. Overnight, your file moved from civilian classification to a restricted tier reserved for beings whose origins cannot be explained by standard human development. Your bloodline wasn't missing information, it contained too much of it. Markers associated with accelerated intuition. Markers linked to high sensory integration. Markers tied to precognitive pattern recognition. Markers observed only in a handful of individuals across centuries. People who were later mythologized, canonized, or erased entirely. But here's the part that shattered the analysts. Your lineage had no branching decay. No dilution. No weakening over generations. Instead, your ancestral line moved like a single thread, intact, protected, preserved, as though every generation knew someone extraordinary was coming and protected their gift for you specifically. It was as if the past had been preparing for your arrival long before you were born. That's when the question shifted from, "Who is this?" to "Where did this bloodline come from?" And every answer pointed to the same unsettling conclusion. You descend from a line that does not fit the terrestrial story. The way your ancestors showed up in historical records, abruptly, skillfully, inexplicably, mirrors the patterns of individuals described in ancient texts as messengers, watchers, starborn, or the appointed. People who appeared during eras of transition. People who carried knowledge without having been taught. People whose presence altered political, spiritual, or cultural trajectories. People who were either revered or hunted. Your bloodline contains signatures associated with these mythic profiles, and for decades, that truth has been buried behind clearance levels so high that even elected officials aren't allowed to access the full file. Presidents come and go every 4 or 8 years. But your lineage classification outranks them because it spans centuries of protected documentation, far beyond any governmental term limit or political authority. This is why the presidents don't outrank your ancestry. They simply manage the world while your lineage shapes it. Multiple administrations have reviewed fragments of your file, and every one of them reached the same conclusion. Monitor, but do not intervene. Because intervention requires understanding, and no one fully understands a lineage that predates the systems analyzing it. Your bloodline triggers unexplained reactions in biometric scanners. Your nervous system displays resilience patterns outside the human norm. Your intuition bypasses psychological conditioning pathways entirely. Your emotional recovery defies trauma research. You don't just survive what destroys others, you transmute it. At a metaphysical level, your energy field displays coherent signatures typically associated with spiritual leaders, prophetic lineages, or individuals described as light-bearers in ancient archetypal studies. This is why people react strangely when they meet you, some drawn in without explanation, others intimidated without reason. Souls can recognize what systems cannot, and the systems took notice. Internal memos, still sealed, warned analysts not to approach you with standard influence technique. They noted that every attempt to limit, suppress, or psychologically steer you would backfire. They observed that isolating you only sharpened your mind. They recorded that betrayal only deepened your discernment. They documented that loss only activated latent abilities. What breaks others activates you. What corrupts others purifies you. What distracts others focuses you. Your bloodline is not classified because it's dangerous. It's classified because it's awakening. And the moment you fully step into that awakening, the systems know one thing for certain. You will no longer fit inside the world as it has been designed, because you were born to help redesign it. There is a reason your bloodline file was sealed under a clearance level that outranks prime ministers, presidents, and intelligence directors. It wasn't because you were a threat. It was because your existence answered questions humanity wasn't prepared to face. Your lineage didn't behave like something discovered. It behaved like something deliberately placed into human history, as if guided by an unseen hand shaping generation after generation toward a singular arrival. You. What shook the analysts most wasn't the fragments of ancient DNA or anomalies in your neurological mapping. It was the pattern behind them. Every major turning point in your ancestral chain synced with astronomical events. Eclipses, planetary alignments, celestial anomalies recorded by civilizations that no longer exist. Your ancestors weren't drifting through history. They were appearing at precise intervals, always carrying knowledge beyond the limits of their era. One ancestor predicted a famine before there was any sign of failing crops. Another navigated oceans without instruments centuries before compasses spread. Another survived conflicts that wiped out entire bloodlines around them. Another accurately described constellations only visible from hemispheres they never visited. The pattern was unmistakable. Your lineage moved like a coded message sent through time. This is where the classified section of your file becomes unsettling. Government historians, astronomers, and geneticists cross-referenced every recorded ancestor of your line with ancient prophecy texts from multiple cultures. Hebrew, Sumerian, Vedic, Kemetic, Zoroastrian, Greek, and an impossible overlap emerged. Every tradition referenced a bloodline that arrives from the stars, walks as human, and awakens during the era of transition. Different names, different languages, same prophecy embedded across civilizations that never interacted. When analysts ran the probability calculations, the result produced an internal alert recommending immediate classification. Your lineage matched every prophecy with a statistical accuracy that broke the simulation logs. That was the moment they realized this wasn't coincidence. It was a blueprint preserved for millennia, encoded through flesh and spirit, waiting for the generation where the world would fracture enough to require someone capable of seeing through illusion, corruption, and engineered fear. Someone whose intuition wasn't learned, it was inherited. Someone whose resilience wasn't trained, it was embedded. Someone whose purpose wasn't chosen, It was activated. And that someone is you. This is why the file was sealed. Not to hide your power from you, but to hide you from the world until the timing was right. Because world systems fear what they cannot categorize. Governments fear what they cannot control. Institutions fear what they cannot predict. And nothing is harder to predict than a bloodline that does not follow linear human evolution. Your emotional signature alone destabilized the algorithms. Your presence altered readings in electromagnetic tests. Your handwriting showed asymmetrical cognition associated with prodigies. Your childhood dreams mirrored classified transcripts from contact cases. And when they ran psychological simulations, every outcome pointed to the same conclusion: you would not be corruptible. You could be delayed, wounded, discouraged, but you could not be owned, redirected, or controlled. That made your bloodline not a liability, but a wild card in a world built on structured systems. And wild cards threaten the entire game. The deepest layer of your classification file, the one almost no one is allowed to access, contains a single note written by an unnamed analyst decades ago. It reads, "This bloodline is not of earthly origin. When it awakens, history will bend. And you are living in the era when the bending begins." The moment your awakening began, the surveillance architecture that normally maps human behavior went silent around you. It wasn't that you disappeared. It was that the algorithms couldn't interpret you anymore. Your emotional patterns stopped matching any known psychological profile. Your decisions became unpredictable to predictive models. Your intuition contradicted statistical probability, yet landed on truth every time. The system labeled it a cognitive divergence spike, but internally, analysts called it what it really was: activation. Your bloodline has an internal switch, an ancient inheritance that only turns on when the world reaches a critical threshold. For most of your life, this switch was dormant, hidden beneath the noise of human struggle, pain, and conditioning. But every betrayal, every heartbreak, every closed door, every moment you felt pulled toward something bigger, they all pressed against that switch until it finally clicked. And when it did, everything around you began to shift. People who once manipulated you suddenly lost access. Patterns that trapped you suddenly unraveled. Cycles you thought you were cursed to repeat suddenly snapped. The spiritual interference surrounding you dissolved overnight. Your bloodline recognized danger, recalibrated, and reactivated the protection codes embedded within your lineage. This wasn't metaphorical. It was energetic, ancestral, quantum. Your DNA began expressing traits that had been sleeping for generations. Heightened perception, discernment that slices through deception, a gravitational presence that unsettles false-hearted people, and a clarity that feels like déjà vu because your ancestors already walked the path you're stepping onto. This is why certain people started acting strangely around you. They feel the activation even if they cannot name it. They sense the elevation even if they pretend not to see it. They instinctively know you carry something ancient and untamed. Some were drawn closer. Some were pushed away. Some were exposed. Some were removed. Your awakening triggered a purification process. Anyone who couldn't move with you was forced to fall away. Not by your choice, but by energetic incompatibility. You rose frequencies they couldn't breathe in. Meanwhile, those who monitor unexplained human anomalies panicked. You were no longer behaving like someone influenced by external conditions. Your inner compass took over, and once that happens, you become unpredictable to institutions and unstoppable to destiny. Government behavioral models rely on patterns. You broke every pattern. Intelligence systems rely on predictability. You became unreadable. Control structures rely on compliance. You became sovereign. Your file, already classified above presidential level, received a new label after your activation. Non-linear asset, not subject to external influence. In simple terms, you cannot be controlled, bought, manipulated, or psychologically rerouted. Your lineage sharpened itself through centuries of survival, prophecy, exile, and rebirth. Your spirit has been fortified through lifetimes of remembering who you are. That makes you one of the rarest beings alive, a chosen one who cannot be intercepted. But the most shocking discovery came when analysts tried to map your energetic field. Human fields typically form irregular shapes. Yours formed a geometrically perfect pattern identical to symbols found in ancient star maps and pre-human petroglyph. Symbols associated not with worship but with origin. Your bloodline didn't evolve upward from Earth. It descended downward with purpose. This is why the world feels familiar even when nothing makes sense. This is why your dreams feel like memories, not fantasies. This is why guidance arrives before you ask for it and warnings arrive before danger appears. Your ancestors didn't leave you. They're encoded in you, awakening one layer at a time. You're not just carrying a name. You're carrying a lineage that governments classify and prophets recognized before history began. And now that it's activated, nothing on Earth can silence your rise. When your activation data reached the highest clearance tiers, a quiet but irreversible shift occurred inside the institutions that have monitored bloodlines for generations. They didn't just update your file, they reclassified your entire existence. You went from an anomaly to an inevitable force, from a statistical outlier to a predicted fulcrum point in humanity's timeline. The final analysis didn't ask who you are. It asked what happens when someone like you remembers, because your bloodline wasn't designed to blend in. It was designed to awaken exactly when the world reached a breaking point, when systems of fear began to collapse, when humanity forgot its origin, when truth became a rarity rather than a birthright. Your arrival wasn't random. It was synchronized. Every ancestor before you carried a fraction of the code. You carry the full sequence. This is why your presence disrupts deception. This is why people confess things to you they didn't plan to reveal. This is why liars get nervous, manipulators malfunction, and corrupt individuals retreat the moment you enter a room. Your energy is a truth serum encoded across centuries. Your spirit is a signal civilizations once waited for. Your consciousness is a bridge between what humanity was and what it must become. And the institutions know this. There is a sealed report, almost poetic in tone, written by a director whose name you'll never know. It states, "Subject's bloodline matches the prophetic lineage described in pre-cataclysmic text. Their emergence marks the opening of the correction era. Attempts at containment unnecessary. Attempts at interference impossible. Correction era. The age where destiny corrects what corruption created. Where truth rises through individuals who cannot be controlled. Where ancient lineages awaken to restore balance. Your awakening wasn't spiritual fatigue. It was prophecy timing. Every hardship that almost broke you served one purpose: to remove the layers placed on you by people who feared your potential. To strip away the identities that weren't yours. To force your inner coding to reboot, rewire, and reemerge. Now the truth of your bloodline is visible in everything you do. You sense people's intentions before they speak. You feel energetic shifts before events unfold. You walk away from destruction before it reaches you. You attract connections that accelerate your destiny. You repel those who cannot match your frequency. And here is the revelation governments feared the most. Once a classified bloodline self-realizes, no institution on Earth can outrank it. The presidents they tried to shield your file from? They were temporary guardians. But you are a permanent phenomenon. Your ancestors didn't give you a history. They gave you a mandate to break cycles that have held your lineage hostage, to dismantle patterns that enslaved the world in fear, to rise where others collapsed, to speak where others stayed silent, to build where others destroyed. Your bloodline is not classified because it is dangerous. It is classified because it is destiny-bearing. The systems knew your arrival would change the trajectory of families, communities, timelines, and even nations. They knew your consciousness would behave like a tuning fork, forcing the world around you to resonate with truth or fall apart. They knew your rise would expose corruption effortlessly, because your lineage carries frequencies institutions cannot mimic. You are not here to be understood. You are here to be felt, to be recognized at a soul level, to be answered by those who have waited lifetimes to meet someone like you. And now that your bloodline has fully awakened, the era of being underestimated is over. The era of being hidden is over. The era of being silenced is over. The new era, the one your ancestors envisioned, begins the moment you accept what the system already admitted. You were never meant to fit inside history. You were meant to reshape it. Your bloodline is classified. Your destiny is not. And the world is about to learn the difference.